Alright, so even though this is a movie channel, occasionally movies are connected to TV shows. So my plan is once a month to talk about a TV series connected in some way to a movie. And for this month, that is The Purge, Season 1 and Season 2. So I watched through both seasons, 10 episodes each, not too bad. And I've got some notes. So I've already done a video on the first 4 Purge movies. I've done a video on the Forever Purge, which at the time of this recording has just come out. Now we're talking about the Purge TV series. In my video for the first 4 movies, I talk about a lot of questions that I had just about the world and how things work in that world. So that's what a lot of this is. Just I was sitting down and taking notes. And anytime I thought of something, I was like, well, how would that work? Would that be legal? Does that make sense? So a lot of things like that I'm going to be covering in this video. The short part, if you want to skip all the details, I think this is a property that works really well as a TV show. Especially with the fact that the movies are all pretty much anthology movies. They don't really follow the same characters. There's a couple recurring characters, but for the most part you're focusing on new characters every movie. So both seasons of the television show we're focusing on new characters, different characters that we're following throughout the season. That in the first season I think they all end up crossing over. In the second season, less so. I think I literally just finished it, and I'm trying to remember. I think there's kind of 2 main sets. And so there's a couple characters that all end up interconnecting on this end, and then there's other characters that end up interconnecting on this end. But I don't think there's any crossover with the 2 final groups, as it were. But that works really well for a TV show, I think. Just like I said with the movies, you never know who's going to die, and there are people that you would expect to die that don't die, and people that you wouldn't expect to die that do die. So I think the series works really well, and the extended time gives them time to answer some of the questions that I had when watching the movies and really explore the world outside of the hour and a half that we get to see in the movies. The first season completely takes place immediately leading up to, throughout Purge Night, and then immediately after Purge Night. So it's like a movie in that sense. But the second season, the Purge Night is the first episode, and then the whole season tracks what people are doing outside of the Purge, in the off season, as it were. How they're preparing for the next Purge, how they're responding to what happened during the previous Purge, and then the last episode we get the next year's Purge. So it covers a whole year. So even the scope of the shows is different from season to season, not even just the characters. So that's kind of my short version. If you don't want to hear all of the questions that I've been asking myself while watching these, I think that if you like the movies, you will probably really like the shows, because it expands that world really well, I think. So let's get into my notes. I've got these separated by season, but some of them are more just general questions. It's just that's when I thought of them was while watching that season. So starting with season 1. It's implied in season 1 that hospitals are off limits or hospitals are protected. I don't remember them saying that in any of the films, but it's possible that I've missed it. But they do later confirm in the second season that hospitals are considered off limits. So I was confused about that when watching the first season, because someone in the show says something along those lines, and I was like, is she right? Or does she just think that? But it is true in the world. Hospitals are protected. There's a big plot point revolving around these workers doing these like business people doing international business on the Purge. And so they have to work on Purge night, and they're in this secured floor of their building, continuing to work to get this business deal done. And one of them says something along the lines of, like, international business doesn't stop just for the Purge. And I'm just like, wouldn't it though? Like, wouldn't other companies understand that, oh, these people could die if they're not, safe enough? Like, I don't know. That seems, I guess it's a competitive thing, right? If you want to do business internationally and you're closed on Purge night, but another company isn't, that's going to give them an advantage. So I don't want to say that it's not believable. I just feel like, come on, other countries, give us a break. Multiple locations with separate characters say something along the lines of everyone has agreed not to purge, or everyone has signed a contract saying that they're not going to purge, they're not allowed to purge, blah, blah, blah. And that helps make these places safe. But you can just break a contract, right? Because everything's legal. So you can sign a contract before the purge and say, yeah, I won't purge you. But there's not going to be a punishment for breaking that contract. Because while you broke it, breaking contracts is legal. So I don't understand how that works. Maybe that's an exception, right? Maybe that's one of the few crimes that you actually can be punished for after the purge. But they don't say that. And there are people in multiple scenarios that have signed these waivers that still partake in purging. So it seems like it's just a show of good faith. But if it doesn't mean anything, why bother? I thought that was weird. We've got a religious element throughout the first season with basically this, you can call it a religion or a cult or a combination of the two, built around this idea of the giving and people allowing themselves to be a victim. They are a giver. They're giving themselves to purgers. Because, again, this whole idea of purge and purify, and it's like, I'm going to sacrifice my life so that this person can get out those violent desires that they have in them. And it's pretty messed up. It's pretty messed up to, it's almost a type of suicide. But you're not killing yourself. You're letting someone else get the pleasure of killing you. And you're not supposed to resist or anything like that. It's weird, but again, it's one of those things that if the world of the Purge was real, there probably would be something like that. Again, these TV shows really let you see pockets of the world that you wouldn't get to see in a movie. I already mentioned the business team. They're working in a floor, and the security detail that's on duty that night, they're like, this floor is secure. We can't guarantee your safety on other floors. And I'm just like, you can't protect a floor, right? If the whole building is accessible and right, you can't. And this is one of the few problems that I have, one of the few big problems that I have with the Purge franchise as a whole, is that the very first movie showed us that the security systems in place are not adequate. And it's not even that hard to get past them. And all the way up through the most current movie, there's been no development. They're still using the same security systems, even though in the world of the Purge, it's been over a decade since the Purge started. So it's bizarre to me that the first movie would choose to focus on the flaws of the security system, but at no point is there another company that's like, ours is better. They don't talk about real estate companies, building structures from the ground up designed to keep people out rather than trying to fortify an existing structure. And that's one of those things that I feel like there's a story to be told there, right? With a company that's like, we will build you a castle, right? Like a very small but indestructible building. But they haven't done anything with that. And so every time that they talk about, oh, this place is secure, or this facility is safe, or, you know, they can't get in here, right? Every time a character says that, I'm like, are you stupid? Or is the writing lazy? And I I can believe that the characters are stupid. I don't know how well known it is by citizens in the world that these security systems are not that great. So maybe it's one of those things that the news doesn't talk about, right? Certainly the government wouldn't talk about it, and the companies selling the systems aren't going to talk about their flaws any more than they legally have to. So I guess it's just citizens taking things at face value and being like, oh, there's a security system, we're safe. But it's bizarre to me that the movies haven't shown, future, because these take place in the future. So, like, show us future security. Make up technology, that's fine. But you pointed out this issue in the first movie, and now you've got 5 movies and 20 episodes of television, and you haven't addressed it again. It's just a little weird to me. I need to go faster, or else this video is going to be forever. There are comments about people getting more bold on the Purge, which suggests that it's not working, because the idea is you purge, you get that out of your system, and then as a whole, violence in the country goes down. But if every purge is getting worse, that shows that violence is increasing. It's just limited to this one night. So, like, these are the questions that I would ask if I was a citizen in this world. Different pro-purgers talk about the purge being necessary and the purge being good. And it's hard to tell if people are using those things interchangeably, because some of them, they're definitely like, oh, it's horrible, but we need it to keep, it saved this country. And then there are other people that are like, yeah, the purge, let's go kill people. So I kind of would like to see more of a deep dive into that, and maybe people from the same organization who have the same goals but different beliefs about why they're doing those goals and the conflict there. I think that could be interesting to watch. I just wrote that it reminds me of a movie called 13 Sins, which is basically about a guy getting paid a lot of money to do a lot of crimes, and he's told if he does them all, they will essentially make sure that he doesn't face any consequences. But if he ever stops, he's on his own, and he's going to go to jail for a long time. And just the idea of escalating violence, it reminded me of that. That's on Netflix. If you're into stuff like The Purge, check that out, 13 Sins. It stuck in my head, and I watched it a couple years ago, so maybe check it out. I wrote down at one point, so this cult that they have, and they talk about the giving, I wrote down, does the leader of the cult give? And I assumed no, but I thought maybe it was something that no one in the cult ever thinks to ask, but it's brought up by characters outside of the cult later on. Like, you don't think it's weird that this person that talks about how great this is never does it herself, right? Like, so I was glad they addressed that. At one point, a character is driving with night vision goggles on, and I was like, well, maybe he's doing that so he doesn't have to have his headlights on, so he's not seen as much. But then in wider shots, the headlights are on also. So I'm like, if you're driving with headlights and night vision goggles on, I don't think you're going to be able to see much, because everything's going to look bright. That just made me laugh. So this cult that has these volunteer victims, they drive around, they have a delivery route. And so there are people waiting at the bus stop to be given a victim that then they go do whatever they want to do with. And some of them kill them, some of them take them to be auctioned off somewhere else. Some of, they do different things with them. But I'm just like, if you're there and you're ready to murder people and it's legal, wouldn't you storm the whole bus? And I guess it's a mentality of, because they mentioned that the delivery route is the same every year. So I guess it's a different mindset of, because there are groups of people waiting. One group where everyone's working together. And it's like, if consistently getting a free victim with no effort is more important to them than, killing a person or getting money for auctioning a person, then I guess that makes sense. But it seems unlikely that over an entire delivery route, at no point over the years, is somebody like, no, give me more. You can't stop me. I'm going to take everyone on the bus. They don't mention that. They don't talk about, oh, this used to be a problem and we figured out the solution to it. So that's one of the things that doesn't add up to me. There's a big party with a bunch of rich people during the show, and they celebrate serial killers. And they talk about how brave they were to have purged before it was legal. But most rich pro-purgers in these installments are also anti-poor. And I'm like, I feel like most serial killers were poor. So that's just a weird thing. But again, to me, that's good because it blurs the lines more, right? If someone had been like, oh, we're celebrating these people, but they were poor and we hate the poor, that would have been too on the nose. So I liked it. It's just confusing. And it's like, it kind of makes me wonder, are they actually celebrating these people, or is it just a facade? Is it just something that, they're saying that it's really about the activity and the process so that they don't have to acknowledge that it's really about rich versus poor? So I thought that was interesting. Another just little note that I wrote down. There are characters and organizations in the world of the Purge that build structures to like make their own reality shows and tests and different things like that. And those structures are hastily made and cheap. And I'm like, that's a smart way to make a television show for cheap. If the sets in the world are cheap, then the production for those is going to be cheaper than having to, do a fancy building. So that's just a little meta moment when I was watching it. There's a Baldwin in this. I forget which one. Not the famous one. Not Alec. But they all sound the same. And I just wrote, Baldwin is distracting. Because every time he talks, it just makes you think of Alec Baldwin. And then I got taken out of the show. So I like it when it's actors that I've never seen in anything before. It makes it seem more realistic to me. We've got characters talking about purging over a bad date, having a purge wish list, right? And like the people that you plan on purging, which I've got a note somewhere else. It's like, how does conspiracy to commit murder work? Are you guilty of conspiracy before the purge? If the murder happens during the purge? If you planned it ahead of time? Lots of questions. There are businesses where people will pay other people to go out and purge for them. So I talked about in the movies, they have people go out and collect people so that the rich can purge in their own homes without having to go out. But now you can just, it's a contract killer. It's an assassin, but specific to the purge, which I thought was very interesting. I feel like I'm going to keep saying that sentence. I thought that was very interesting, but that's why I wrote this down. At one point, we see that one of the members of the cult that has been chosen to give at one of the bus stops changes her mind and she doesn't want to do it anymore. And so I was like curious. I was like, how is this cult going to handle it? Are they going to be like, oh, that's fine. It's your choice, blah, blah, blah. Nope. They force her off the bus and just let her get taken as she's screaming for help. And I'm like, not how I would have played it if I was a cult leader. But I'm not. So what do I know? We've got this label, OMF, which stands for Original Martyr Family, which is used when talking about, so in the movies, the fourth film, the prequel film called The First Purge, shows that it started as an experiment on Staten Island. And so citizens who had family members die, or I guess even if they didn't, but citizens who were there on Staten Island during the very first purge are now in the show referred to as OMFs for Original Martyr Family. I guess martyr implies that someone in their family died. And it's just one of those weird things about releasing installments out of date where it's like Charlie, I forget her last name, but the senator running for president in the Purge election year would have been an OMF. But If it's mentioned in that movie, it's briefly and it's once. But it probably wasn't because this show came out afterwards, so it probably wasn't a concept yet. So that's just one of those things where if you were to watch it in chronological order, they make a big deal about OMFs in the show, and then you have an OMF running for president, and none of the news coverage or press or anything like that uses the term OMF, because they talk about how her family was killed. I guess this is on me. This is because I don't think her family died in the original Purge. It was just several years ago. It was a flashback. So maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. So I'm going to say that's on me. My fault. You're good. You're good. The Purge election year. Killing for promotion. So we have multiple characters in this that either talk about or actually go through with killing someone, either who's above them and they want to get promoted, or who is up for the same position that they are. And it's just like, if I were in charge of promotions in a company, right? If I'm at the top, and I know that this person is killing their way up the ladder, I'm not going to let that slide, right? Because that means eventually they're going to be coming for me. So you would think that people wouldn't be killing for positions in their company unless they're doing it anonymously through these contract killers. But there are people that just straight up murder with no concern of animosity. So I don't know if maybe that was because it was kind of in the heat of the moment. It didn't seem like it was pre-planned. But yeah, that was just like, would companies be allowed to fire for that? Or is it something where they're protected by Purge law that they can't be, not prosecuted, but they can't even be reprimanded for it or unemployed for it? Like, how would that work with unemployment, right? It's like, well, I lost my job because of something that I did that wasn't legal, right? But like, companies have their own policies. I don't know. That it was very interesting, as I keep saying. I would be curious about how that works. A big line people keep saying is, "It's my right to purge." And that it's just a weird semantic thing with me. I'm like, rights are different from things that are legal, right? Is that just me? Because I'm like, we have lots of laws, but then we have the Bill of Rights. So to me, rights are fewer and more simplistic than things that are allowed by law. And laws can change, whereas rights rarely do throughout the course of our country's history. So I don't know if that's me putting too much emphasis on one word or the other, but this idea of it's my right to purge, I'm like, I get what you're saying, but I think you're saying it wrong. But maybe that's me. I don't know. I am not a lawyer. In the movies, I just kept writing different characters who suck. And so in this, for season 1, I just wrote Jenna sucks, and then later I wrote Lila sucks more. So if you're watching those for the first time, sorry to spoil it, but both of those characters sucks. We've got people buying other people at auctions. At one point, there's a white male character who collects a lot of people to purge them, and he talks about, I wrote down something. So the idea is you can't do anything these days. And so one girl is someone that he had a bad date with, and like he was making racist jokes about her skin color and how she must have had it so easy because colleges have to accept more black, And so now later, as he's getting ready to purge her, he's like, I'm just making a joke, right? You can't say anything these days, blah, blah, blah. And I just wrote, it was a little heavy-handed with that. I know there are people like that out there, and it was mostly confined to one episode, but it was a little too much Purge election year for me, which if you've seen my video on the films, Purge election year I thought was too heavy-handed, too blunt, and not, didn't leave enough for the audience to decide their opinions. So just a little hint of that in this, but not too much. There is an event called the Carnival of Flesh in this world, where people can buy people at an auction and then rent out tents and do whatever they want with them. And at a certain point, somebody escapes from the Carnival of Flesh, and it's like a huge deal, and people are chasing them down. And I'm like, has no one escaped before? Because they're acting like no one has escaped before. But I'm like, is this a more recent thing? And it's weird that nobody would have escaped it before. And then they chase them down, and they have all these bouncers and security guards from the carnival and collectors who are normally out collecting to then sell, and I assume they get a proceed of how much the person goes for. But they're all out chasing these people that escaped. And I'm like, aren't you going to make more money just collecting more people? And don't those security guards need to stay at the carnival so that more people don't escape? So that didn't make any sense to me. They say something along the lines of like, I don't know, we can't let them get away with this or blah, blah, blah. But I'm just like, I feel like you're making the situation worse for yourself by extending it way past the initial incident. Then I wrote, Penny sucks. She's completely contradictory. So Penny is one of the characters who's in this cult who wants to give herself up as a victim. And even after she sees the person who wants, changes her mind but is forced out of the bus, and even after she sees other members of this cult just murdered right then and there outside the bus, she's still willing to be a victim. But then, spoiler alert, she ends up becoming auctioned off at this Carnival of Flesh, and the person that buys her is her ex-boyfriend / drug dealer, and she's like terrified, and she starts losing her mind, and she tries to escape, and she's like, no, don't take it, don't take it. And I'm just like, you knew that this was a possibility, right? And even if it wasn't someone you had a personal connection with, you know that people are going to do horrible things to you. And so then it was like, well, maybe it's just this guy is a trigger for her, right? So maybe she didn't think. But then later on, as he's like telling her what he's going to do to her and all this stuff, at another point, she's like, do whatever you want, I'm ready, blah, 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 blah. And then later on, she's like, no, help me get out of here. And she's just completely contradictory. And it's hard to follow her. It's because there are some things that she's doing that only make sense if she doesn't want to die. But then later on, she'll be like, no, I want to die. I'm ready to die. Like, I want to. And then when she's about to die, she's like, no, I don't. And it just keeps going back and forth. And it's, again, most of the issues with it are confined to an episode or two. So it doesn't ruin it. It's just weird and inconsistent. At one point, there's a character that's rescuing people, and he's wearing a mask, and so he kills these other people around, and he's like, I'm not gonna hurt you, come with me, and the people are scared of them, and I was just like, would superheroes in real life be scary? If you're getting beat up, and someone else in a mask comes in and beats up the people that were beating you up, and then asks you to go with them, I've always taken that for granted with superheroes, but I'm like, I guess that is kind of sketchy. Maybe that's why colorful costumes are important rather than tactical gear. But I thought that was kind of funny. We got more stuff in this show about how crime in this world isn't actually lower, like the government and the media says that it is. But again, it's not super heavy-handed with it. It's just putting it out there. All right, so there's this character. And I'm trying to not do too many spoilers in here. So there's a character that rounds up a bunch of people to purge them. And at a certain point, he's very much about, within these 12 hours, this stuff is legal and I can purge you and it's my right to purge and all this stuff. And, minor spoiler, he survives through the night to the sirens. And he's about to murder someone right before the sirens. And the sirens go off and he was like, oh, well, I guess I'll have to, try to get you again next year, blah, blah, blah. So it seems like he respects the time frame, but he had set up this huge, elaborate prison system inside this abandoned school, which must have taken months. So I'm like, you're trespassing, you're conspiring to commit murder, right? You're presumably illegally getting a lot of the materials that you're using because he sets up traps and explosives and stuff like that. So it's like, do people respect the sirens or not? And is it different, right? Because if he got caught setting it up, it would be more of a minor offense, whereas if he got caught murdering someone, it would be a more major offense. It's very confusing to me. The idea that people are about to shoot someone and then these sirens go off and they're like, oh, can't do it now, and then they just let them go. The second season deals with that more, but I was very confused. And I'm still confused. Even though it deals with it more, it's still confusing. Alright, where are we at? A lot of people are justifying their actions in different ways. We have one character saying stuff along the lines of, I'm just saving my sister, right? So he's killing several people. He's not a purger. He's just saving his sister. We have people that were hired by other people, or security guards, or auctioneers, blah, blah, blah. That's just doing my job. And there are some military people that talk about just following orders. And it's just like, at what point do the ends not justify the means? Right? I understand wanting to save your sister, but if you're not a killer, how many people are you gonna kill before you're like, this is too much. I can't do this. I can't handle this. If you're a security guard who's trying to protect people that you don't even really know, you're just being paid to do it, and a freaking army comes, you really gonna stay there? I don't know. It makes me wonder where people's lines are, or if they don't really have one and they're just using these things as an excuse for their violence. Then I wrote, Rick sucks too. So a lot of people in this show suck. Okay, so at one point someone is talking about, an anti-purger is talking about why it's a bad idea and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, if people continue to purge every year, killing people that they don't like, killing people that they want to get rid of, blah, 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 blah. The quote I wrote down, and most of the quotes I write down are paraphrases, but the quote I wrote down is, what will be left? A nation of murderers. And it's just one of those things that it's like, on a long enough timeline in the world where the purge is a thing, everyone that's left will have killed somebody. Right? I'm like, what percentage of the population now has killed another person? And how different would the world be if you just like knew or highly suspected that everybody that you see anywhere has killed somebody? That was interesting. It was an interesting thought. Another quote, if it really worked, wouldn't we stop needing it? So this idea of, when we purge, we get that out of our systems, right? And then we're good. So it's just like, well, if that worked, wouldn't we not need it anymore? If we got rid of crime, if we got rid of those desires, why do we still need it? So I really like when characters in the world bring these things up. I don't want to say that as a spoiler. I will just say that not everybody follows the sirens. Not everybody stops at the sirens. And for me and my worldview and my mindset, it was a protagonist of the show that chose to take matters into his own hands, even though technically it wasn't legal anymore. And it's just like, yeah, get it. Don't let the sirens stop you. And then there's a line at the very end of the last episode talking about how the NFFA, which is the political party in power, is trying to curb the threat of revolutionary purge night terrorism. And it's just like a comment made by a news anchor in the background. And I'm not sure what it meant. Particularly the word revolutionary. Is revolutionary just like new and different and advanced? Or does it mean like they're trying to start a revolution and overthrow the government? And it didn't really get picked up in season 2. So, I guess I won't know. I'll never know what that meant. I am at 35 minutes. And I just got through season 1. So I'm going to stop this video here. And I will do a part 2 for season 2 that I will put up pretty soon after. So if you're watching this right as it's come out, part 2 might not be up yet. It'll be up soon. But if it's distantly past early July 2021, the second part is probably up. And there will probably be a link somewhere around if you want to watch for my thoughts on part 2, because I have even more of those. So I'm going to stop this here, do a part 2 for those that are interested. That's all I've got for season 1. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.